Hi guys, welcome to the channel. So today we are going to discuss on installation of RHEL 10. So we are going to discuss on RHEL 10 how we can install RHEL 10 on any of your virtual machine. So before going to installation, let's see what is the hardware configuration required for the installation. So if I talk about hardware configuration, so the hardware configuration required for the RHEL 10 installation is CPU. Minimum what you require is dual core and recommended is quad core and above, because if you want to go for virtualization you need require more than more CPU or more cores. The hard disk minimum requirement for the hard disk or storage is 25 GB and recommended is 50 GB, and RAM minimum is required 4 GB RAM and recommended is to have around 16 GB RAM for the installation. If I talk about network or NIC, the minimum required is 1000 Mbps and minimum is required as 1000 Mbps and recommended also is 1000 Mbps. So if I talk about the types of installation, there are two different types of installation. One is media based installation. So media based installation is nothing but where you are going to use a bootable media and install the system with the bootable media. So the bootable media may be either an ISO image or DVD or an external hard drive or USB. The second type of installation what we have is network based installation. So installing the system through a network server. For example, if you are having 100 systems in the network and you want to install all the 100 systems, so it will take time for going to each and every system and install it. So we can go for a network based installation. So in network based installation, we have two types. One is Kickstart installation. So Kickstart is a network based attended installation, installing the clients through a network server. In Kickstart installation, the client has to be booted through a bootable media and provide the path of the Kickstart server file. So which is the sample server. For that, you need to provide the path of the sample server file. Using the provided path, the client system gets installed according to the configurations configured on a Kickstart file. So whatever configuration you are going to do on the Kickstart file, so the other client systems are going to get installed through that particular configuration. The second type of network installation what we have is PX installation. So in PX installation is network based unattended installation. So in this type of installation, the client system has to get installed, or the client system getting installed through a network server, just like Kickstart. In PXC, the client has to be booted through a network boot. So you can go for BIOS and select network booting. And when you start the system, automatically the client system is going to get the network server. So the client system looks for the PXC server and gets installed according to the configuration configured in the network server. So these are the two different types of installations what we have. So method of media based installation. So we have two types of media based installation. One is text based installation. The other one is GUI based installation. So in text based installation, installing the system to with minimum packages to work as a standalone workstation where you don't have GUI, networking or server, just a standalone workstation. And GUI based installation, installing the system with selected packages, manual partitioning, networking, servers and graphical user interface. You can select and install it. The partitions for RHEL 10, what you are going to create, a recommended partition for RHEL 10. The first partition what you have to create is slash partition, which is nothing but the root partition where all the other directories comes under or resides under. According to the requirement, you can select the partition size, where whether you want all the other directories to be under slash or you want to create separate partition for each and every directory. So here, for example, we are going to select under root partition as 25 GB. We are going to assign 25 GB. The next partition what we have to create is boot partition slash boot. So where your booting files and kernel will be located, and the minimum size required for that is 500 MB. So that can be increased according to your requirement. So we are going to select around 1 GB for the boot partition. The next partition is swap partition. The swap partition is nothing but it's a virtual memory used by the system apart from your RAM, and the size of the boot partition swap partition should be double than your RAM size. So these are the requirement what you are going to select for the installation. Now let's see how to create a virtual machine and install RHEL 10 under that. So for that, either you can go for Oracle VirtualBox or VMware Workstation or any virtual software what you are going to use. So I'm here using VMware Workstation. So in this VMware Workstation, we are going to create a new virtual machine and install RHEL 10 under this virtual machine. So let's create a new virtual machine. Click on this, create new virtual machine. And well, it gives you a welcome wizard saying that what type of configuration do you want to create. So we'll go for the typical configuration. Say next. And here we can select, I will install the operating system later. So virtual machine will be created with a blank hard disk. Say next. And here we are going to select Linux operating system, and let's see whether we have any. So we don't have anything called as RHEL 10. So we'll go with RHEL 9 itself. Say next. And here you can select where do you want to store that particular image file, as well as the name what you want to give. So let's give the name as RHEL 10. And if you want to select a particular storage directory or particular partition, you can just go for that. So I'm going to select a person. Let's go for virtual machine. And let's create one directory here. So I'll create a directory called RHEL 10, as we have already one directory. So I'm going to give -01 and say next. Then we'll give the size. So the maximum size what you want to give. So I'll give 40 GB, allocate 40 GB space for the virtual machine, and I'll store it as a single file. I'll not go for multiple files. I'll go for a single file. Say next. And it's going to give you all the configurations what you have made. If you want to customize, you can go for this customize hardware. So let's not go for that. Say finish. Now we'll attach the ISO image and select the ISO image. Say open and say OK. Now let's start the virtual machine. So once you boot the virtual machine, it's going to go for these three options, where we get the first option as install Red Hat Enterprise Linux 10.0. If we select this option, it is going to go for installation through GUI mode. The next option what we have is test this media and install Red Hat Enterprise Linux 10.0. So if we go for this option, it is going to test the media before starting the installation. Testing the media is nothing but checking the media whether it is properly burned or written, so that it does not stuck in between of the installation process. Then what we have is troubleshooting mode. So if you have already installed the operating system and you want to troubleshoot, in that case we can go for this option. And here we have two options. One is install Red Hat Enterprise Linux 1.0 in basic graphic mode. So when you are going to select this, is sometimes what happens, the installation process will be unable to find your drivers for the graphic card. So with this option, what we are saying is, we are saying that install with whatever graphic drivers we have, basic graphic drivers what we have, and later we can download the drivers and install it to start the installation process, so that it does not hang for the graphic card. Then what we have is rescue Red Hat Enterprise Linux system. Means if we have already installed the operating system, now there is some issues with the operating system and you want to troubleshoot that. In that case, we can go for this option. So let's press escape to go back. And here we are going to go with install Red Hat Enterprise Linux 10.0. So let's go with this option. So once you select that option, first it is going to start your load your kernel, then your init rd image, init rd ramfs, which is nothing but the image of the operating system, which will be transferred to the RAM to start the process. Then it is going to start all the applications required for the installation process. Now you can see it is going to start everything. It is giving few errors, no, not an issue, and it starts all the services or applications required for the installation process. See, whatever is required, it is going to start all the services. And you can see here importing your import of certificate added to the, and here it is going to start your installer. So installer is nothing but your, the name of installer what we have in Linux is called as Anaconda. So what exactly this installer do? This installer is going to capture all the configurations what you are going to make at the time of installation, and stores in a file called /root/anaconda-ks.cfg, which is also known as sample file for the kickstart configuration file. So if you want to configure a kickstart server, this is the file what we are going to use for configuring kickstart. And here you can see, and here we are going to get the configurations whatever you want to make, you can make the configurations here. So it gives you welcome to Red Hat Enterprise Linux 10, and it is going to ask you for the language what you want to use for the installation process. So here we are going to go with the language settings. So first, the keyboard. So as the language what we have selected is US English, so the keyboard is also selected as US English. So we don't have to make any changes here. And time zone. So by default, it has selected the time zone as is Asia, Kolkata. So if you want to use some other time zone, you can select the time zone according to your requirement. So what time zone you want to use it. So I'll go with Asia, Kolkata. Then software. In software, it is saying that connect to Red Hat. So in connect to Red Hat, if you have already a Red Hat username and password and you want to get registered with Red Hat, you can provide the username and password and you can just register. So it will automatically get all the updates and everything. You can, that means you are connecting to the Red Hat repository. So right now we'll not go for that. So if you have Red Hat username and password, you can just provide here, or if you have activation key, you can give the organization ID and authorization keys what you have. Say I don't want right now. Next, installation source. Installation source means from where you are installing it. So by default, it has selected auto detected source. Auto detected source is nothing but your CD-ROM. So if you want to go with Red Hat CDN or network installation, you can go for this option and provide the path of the installation. That is kickstart file or whichever path you have where your ISO image is, you can go with that. So I'll go with the default one, that is auto detected installation source. Then here software selection. Let's go for software selection. In software selections, we have base environment and additional software selected environment. So means additional softwares for the selected environment. So here we have 6 environments. One is server with GUI, where you are going to get all the server packages with graphical user interface. And then what we have is server. So if you don't know what exactly it is, below that it is also describing it. An integrated, easy to manage server. So here you can see an integrated, easy to manage server with graphical interface. So here there is no graphics. Here it is. We have the graphics. Then minimal installation. If you want to work as a standalone workstation, then you can go for the minimal installation. Then if you want to make it as a desktop, user friendly desktop, in that case you can go for this workstation. Then custom operating system. So if you want to make it as a building block for a custom RHEL system, in that case you can select this option. Or if you want to connect to the virtual hypervisor and you want to make it as a host of a virtualization, in that case you can go for this option. So I'll go with this option called as server with GUI. With this, what additional packages you want, you can select it. Let's say for example, here there is a package called as debugging tools. So debugging tools is nothing but we'll be having the tools for debugging the misbehaving applications and diagnosing the performance problems. So if there is any problems, by using these debugging tools, we can debug issue or troubleshoot the issues. Then what we have is DNS name server. So if you want to make this server as a or this system as a DNS server, you want to configure a DNS server. In that case, you can go select this option. Then what we have is file and storage server. So if you want to make it as a file server like NFS server or iSCSI server or CIFS server, then in that case we can go for this option or this package, select this package. If you want to add FTP also, in that case you can go for this one. So what I'll do, I'll not select all this right now. I'll go with few of the packages or environment or softwares for this particular environment. I'll go with this debugging tools and I'll go with this InfiniBand support. So if you don't know what it is, below it is giving you the description for that. Then I'll go with network client system. If you want to configure network servers, you can go for that. I'll not go for that. Then performance tools, remote desktop client. If you want, you can select that as well. Then I'll go with legacy compatibility or Unix compatibility tools, which is going to be compatible program for migration from or working with the legacy utility Unix environment. legacy Unix environment. Now, if you have smart card support, like authentication support, instead of using the username and password, you are using the smart card for login. In that case, you can select this option. Then I'll go with console internet tools, container management. Then I'll go with graphical administration tools, headless management. I'll go with security tools, tools for the integrating and trust verification, then system tools. So a group of collection of various tools for the system, such as client or connecting to Samba shares and tools for monitoring network traffic. So all these tools will be, so these are the additional softwares what I am going to select for the server with GUI environment, base environment. Set done. So once you are selected the packages, let's say done. Now you can see we have selected the software selection as server with GUI. Next comes your system configuration. So here in system configuration, the first option what we have is installation destination, means where do you want to install the operating system. So in installation destination, if you see here, it says that select the device you could like to install to. They will be left untouched until you click on the main menu's begin installation button. So unless and until we select the begin installation button, whatever configurations or whatever selections you are doing here will not be affected. And here it is selecting my hard disk what I have connected. If you have more than one hard disk, it lists all the hard disks here. So whichever hard disk you select, it comes with a tick mark. So here we have only one hard disk, so it shows that automatically selecting that particular hard disk. Now, for example, we don't have the physical hard disk. We want to connect to the network. Means we want to get the storage from the network. In that case, what we can do, we can go for add a disk. And here we can select what type of device you want to connect to, whether it is multi-path devising you have, or SAN devices, or NVMe frameworks, fabric devices. And you can select what you want to do by controller or transport. Depending on that, you can select whatever you want. So right now we don't go for that because we don't have any network storage. And here, after selecting that I want to do it in the local hard disk, it is going to ask you for a storage configuration. And by default it has selected automatic. Automatic means it is going to do the partitioning by itself, means system is going to automatically do all the partitioning work. Now you want to allow system to do it and later you want to review that, you can go for free up space by removing or shrinking the existing one, or you want to customize it by yourself. In that case, you can go for this option, say custom, and say done. Custom is nothing but we want to manually do the partitioning. Let's say done. And here it says that you haven't created any mount points for your Red Hat Enterprise Linux 10.0 installation yet. You can click here to create them automatically, or create new mount points by clicking the plus sign. New mount points will be using the following partition scheme. By default, it has selected the LVM partition scheme, and it is supporting three partition schemes. One is standard partition scheme, LVM partition scheme, and LVM thin provisioning partition scheme. So which you want to use it, you can select accordingly. So I'll go with standard partition scheme. And here below that, you have an option saying that encrypt automatically created mount points by default. So if you want to add encryption to the partitions what you are creating, in that case you can go for this one. Right now I'll not go for that, and say plus sign. Click on the plus sign here, and available size and total size. So when you give plus sign, it will ask you for the mount point. So as we have seen below, three partitions are very important for installation. The first partition or first mount point what we have to create is slash mount point. So the size of slash mount point, I am going to give it as 25 GB. So let's give 25 GB and say add mount point. And you can see one mount point is created. Next, and you can see by default it is taking the file system as XFS. If you want to use any other file system, you can select it. So by default it is taking the file system as XFS. So let's go with that. Means formatting the file partition with the file system called as XFS. And what type of partition it is? Standard partition. Size 25 GB after allocation and everything. It is 23.2.8 GB. Now label means naming anything. If you want to give a name, in that case you can go for this name. So let's create one more partition. Next partition is slash boot partition. The size of slash boot partition, as I told you, minimum should be 500 MB. So we are going to allocate 1 GB for that. Say where your booting files and kernel will be located. Say add mount point. Next. Now as we are using VMware workstation, so we also require this partition called as boot UFI slash boot slash UFI EFI. That also I'll give it as 1 GB and say add mount point. If you are doing on Oracle VirtualBox, then this partition is not required. Say add mount point. Then the next mount point or partition what we are going to create is swap partition. Swap is nothing but virtual memory. And the size of swap should be double than your RAM size. So as we have allocated 2 GB RAM, we are going to say 4 GB RAM, 4 GB space to the swap. We are going to allocate 4 GB and say add mount point. And if you want to create any other mount points as well, you can create it. Slash home slash var, you can create it. So I'll go with this only for mount points and say done. So once we click done, it says that your customization will result in the following changes taking effect after you return to the main menu and begin installation. Means whatever customization you are doing, it will be in the memory. It will not take effect unless and until you select begin installation. And it is saying that destroying the unknown partition in NVMe, that is hard disk name, and it is saying that it is creating these partitions, GPT partition table. Say, excuse me, accept changes. Now you can see custom partitioning is selected. Next, kdump. Kdump. By default, it is enabled. So what is kdump? If you want to understand, you can just click on that and say, and here it says that kdump is a kernel crash dumping mechanism. It is a kernel crash dumping mechanism. In the event of system crash, kdump will capture the information from your system that will be invaluable in determining the cause of the crash. So whatever size you are allocating, by default it will automatically it is selecting certain size. So it says that it is going to capture the reason why, the cause of the kernel crash or system crash, and it is going to capture in that memory. So if you select manual, and by default you can see it is taking 160 MB. So if you want to allocate more than that, you can allocate up to 1927 MB. So let me go with the automatic 160. That is more than enough. As we are using Linux, the kernel crash doesn't happen much. So let's go with done. And here network and host name. So if you click on network and host name, so here you can, so by default it is automatically enabled and it is taking the IP address and other. And if you want to provide the host name as well, you can provide the host name as, let's say for example, RHEL. So I'll give the name as server1.example.com, fully qualified domain name if you want to give. say apply. And here you can see the current host name is server1.example.com, and IP address by default it is taking from your DHCP server. If you want to manually configure it, you can go for configure, and here you can select IPv4 settings, go for manual and say add, and let's give the IP address 192.168.2.10, and netmask by default it will take it as 24, that is 255.255.255.0. and if you have gateway you can provide the gateway. Let's say we have a gateway called 192.168.2.1. then your DNS server. So if you are connected to DNS, then you can give the DNS server. Let's say for example 192.168.2.5 is my DNS server, primary DNS server. And search domain, what is your search domain? Example.com. And say save. And here you can see it is taking automatically. A DNS IP is taken. And say done. Now network we have configured. And then you have user settings. In user settings, it will ask you for the user account password. So here, if you go for user account, that is root, it is saying that root account is used for administrating the system. Root user, also known as super user, has complete access to the entire system. For this reason, logging into this system as a root user is best done only to perform system maintenance and administration. So by default, root account is disabled. Disable means disabling root account will lock the account and disable remote access to the user account. This will prevent unintended administrative access to the system. If you want to disable it, you can go for disable, or if you want to enable it, you can just say enable. Enabling the root account will allow you to set the root password and optionally enable access to the root account on the system. So let me set the password for this user. So I'm using easy password, so it's saying weak. And if you want to allow root through SSH with password, you can also select this option. Otherwise, by default, it will be blocked. So either you can go with that and say done. Now let's go with user creation. It is always recommended to create a user, because in Linux it is always recommended to log in as a normal user to the system. You should never log in directly to the system as a root user. If you want, you can switch later, but always try to log in as a normal user. So I'll give the name, I'll create a user called as Ahmed, and it is saying that add administrative privileges to this user, wheel group membership. So I don't want that. I don't want to make this user as an administrator. If you want, you can just select it. If you want to create it as a normal user, then just uncheck that, saying that add administrative privileges for this. Require password to use this account. Yes, without password, you should never allow user to log into the system. Then let's set the password. Here I am setting the simple passwords. So because of that, it is saying weak. And here, if you go for advanced, here it is saying that the home directory by default it is taking this, and user ID by default it is taking. If you want to specify specific, then you can go for that. Right now, I'll not go for that and say done. Say done. And here we have done all the configurations. So after doing all the configurations, you can go for begin installation. So once we begin installation, it will start preparing the system for installation, and it can see it is creating the partitions required for the installation. So whatever partitions are required, it is going to create all those partitions. And it is formatting the partition with XFS file system. It is downloading the packages what we have selected for installation to beginning the installation. Now preparing the transaction from installation source. That means source, what is the installation source we are selected? CD-ROM or ISO image. So it's preparing the transaction from there. Then it'll start installing the packages. So as we have selected 1536 packages, so it will take a few minutes to install all those packages. So we'll pause the video here, and once the packages are installed, we'll continue with the video. Configuring a Linux policy targeted. That means configuring your security targeted policy to your system. So SE Linux is nothing but security enhanced Linux, which is one of the securities which are inbuilt in your Linux operating system. Then it is installing microcode CTL. Configuring network manager -config server, which is nothing but this is the service or server which manages your interfaces and configuration related to your interfaces. So this package it is configuring. Installing bootloader. So bootloader what we have in Linux is called as grub. So that bootloader it is installing, and that will be located under your /boot directory. Now you can see it is performing the certificate. Now importing the certificate. Configuring Red Hat subscription. So if you have connected, given the username and password, here it is going to configure that. It is now configuring the installed system. creating users what we have configured, then generating your init ramfs image of the operating system. So this also will be located under slash boot directory. Now storing the configuration files and kickstarts. So whatever configuration files are created, now it is storing that. So kickstart file is nothing but slash root slash anaconda file. Now running the post installation scripts. Now you can see it has completed the installation. So after completion of installation, it says that Red Hat Enterprise Linux is now successfully installed and ready for you to use. Go ahead and reboot your system. So now we can select on reboot. Click on here, reboot. Now you can see it is rebooting the system. So it stops all the services for a reboot. Now it is rebooted. Now you can see the system is getting started. It should show the grub information. Here it is not showing. No issues. It is going to start with the operating system. So if you want to see what is happening in the background, press escape. That will show you what all things are getting started. So here you can see mounting a slash boot slash partition and starting the services what are required. So it shows you everything. So after reboot, it shows the user what you have created. So as I've already discussed, saying that whenever you log into the system, you should always log in as a normal user, non-administrative user. Then you can switch to root. If you directly want to switch to root or log in as root or any other user which is not listed here, you can go for not listed. If you click not listed, it will ask you for a username and password. And here it is going to show you the date and time, accessibility, the network configuration, sound, and if you want to power off. So let me select the user, give the password and enter. That will log you into your system. Now you can see it is logged into you, logged in with the user Ahmed, and it shows the applications. And here it says that welcome to Red Hat Linux 10.0 and the developer name. If you want to learn more or learn your way around, check out the tour. So if you are new for Red Hat or new for Linux, you can go for take a tour and it will show you all the options or how it works. So let me skip here. And here it is saying that Red Hat not registered, no problem. And here we have applications like software. If you want to do something with software, if you want to open a terminal, you can click here, open a terminal. If you want to go for text editor, calculator, or if you want to go for any other apps, you can select this. It will show you all the apps like system monitoring, camera, cloud, clock, settings. And here, as I already discussed, you have network, sound, and power. So we can go for terminal. If you want to use terminal, you can click here on terminal. That starts a terminal here. So whenever you log in, here you can see here it is showing that you have logged in as Ahmed at the system name server 1. So tilta means home directory. It says that you are working under home directory, and dollar sign. Dollar sign indicates that you are a normal user. So if you are logged in as a root user, then you will get hash here. If you want to get registered with Red Hat, you can search for subscription manager, Red Hat subscription manager. Let me provide the password for administrator. So because I am a normal user, so it's asking for a password of administrator. So here you can see it is logging you in with the IP address 127.0.0.90, and cockpit is a software which you can do administration tasks through graphics or browser. And here you can click on register, give the username and password. So default proxy will use username and password. If you give and say register, that will register you. So let me not do that now. So this is how you can install RHEL 10 on your virtual machine or Oracle VirtualBox. So kindly subscribe the channel, click on like button if you like the video, and if you are looking for any specific topic, you can just comment on that. I'll try to create, create a video on that particular topic and upload it. Thank you very much, guys. Have a nice day.